Hello everyone, welcome back. In this video, we will be discussing Python while loops. So, a while loop is a loop that's used when you don't know how many times you want to execute a certain body of code. So, in this case, a while loop is created with the lowercase while, and then it is followed by a condition. After you have that, you would then place the body of the while loop that you want to execute for an unknown number of times. So let's get started. So first, we'll create a simple while loop. So we'll say while 5 is less than 10, we want to print 5, see, print 5 is less than 10. Now, when we hit run, we're going to see something that you want to avoid, but for now, we'll just go with it. So when you click run, you should see a response because 5 is less than 10. And if you see, we continuously have 5 is less than 10 running, and it's just running for a very long time, endlessly. So in this case, anytime you see something like that, you want to hit stop because that means you've created an infinite loop. And when you create an infinite loop, that means your loop is going to run forever. And that's not what you want to do. So with the while loop, for your loop to stop, your condition must be false. If it doesn't start off being false, you have to make a certain condition or expression that will help you make that condition false. So let's look at that. So in this case, we won't use this. We'll just modify it and we'll put in here a different thing. So here we'll put a variable. So we'll say I, and out here we'll say I is equal to 6. And here we'll just say we want to print out I. So now we're basically saying I is going to equal 6. And while 6 is less than 10, we want to print I. Now this did not solve our infinite loop problem. This would still be an infinite loop. So for us to change this, we would have to change the value of I every time the loop runs. And to simply do that, we can do I is plus equal to 1. And that will add 1 to I. And if we click play, then you see our loop stops running. And we have 6, 7, 8, and 9. So it printed out every number between 6 and 10. It did not print out 10 because we did not state if I is equal to 10. So to do that, you just add an equal sign, and when you rerun it, then you should see the number 10. So that is a simple example of a while loop. You can also have a while loop that runs with a Boolean. So you could say like var1 is equal to true, and while var1 is equal to true, we want to print out hello everyone. Now, like I said, this will be a infinite loop. So you would have to figure out how to turn var1 to false. And in this case, you can use different things inside of your loop. So you could simply do something that would allow a user to enter in a number. So we could say number equals input, or we'll put int input, enter a number. That would ask our user to enter a number, and then the user will enter it, and then we can say if number is equal to 5, then we want to print the number is 5. Then we'll do an elif, and we'll say elif number is less than 100. Then we're going to print the number is less than 100. Then we'll, of course, put an else statement just in case our conditions are not true. Else print the number is greater than 100. Now that we have that, if we were to, oops, forgot to put a capital. When you use true, it has to be capital. All right, now that we fixed all our errors, if we click run, this would still be an infinite loop because we're not changing our condition anywhere. And for us to change our condition, all we would have to do is establish var1 to be equal to false. So we could do var1 is going to be equal to false. And I'll just copy this and use it in the rest of my statements. And here, that again, here, and we'll do that here. And when we click run, it says enter a number, we'll do 5, and then you see it says the number is 5 and the loop stops running. The loop stopped running because we said that var1 is equal to false. However, let's say we didn't want to continue to do this, then you could say that you want the loop to continue to run. So let's take this out and let's just hit run. We'll put 5. Then you say, oh, there it is. Hello everyone, enter a number. If we say 5 again, it's going to keep asking us. However, if we put in a number, 134, then it says this number is greater than 100. So in this case, if you want your loop to continue to ask you to enter a number, then you would simply just make sure that you don't make your condition false. So when you see I took var1 is equal to false out of the if number is equal to 5, the loop continued to run. The same thing would work here. If I take this out of if the number is less than 100, then if we run our code again and any number we type that's less than 100, our loop will continue to run over and over again. So if I did 12, then you see it says it's less than 100 and asks me again, 45, 23, 67, and it keeps working. Now, as soon as you enter a number that's greater than 100, your loop will stop because that's the only place we make our condition false, right here. So that's an example of using Boolean values in a while loop while also using if, elif, else statements. So now let's work with another example, and we'll make it a little different this time. So let's say we wanted to do something with a string variable. So let's go ahead and make a variable called word, and then we're going to put in program. So now that we have program, we're going to create a while loop. And in this case, we could say I is going to be equal to 0. And then we could say while I is less than or equal to. Now what we're going to do here is we're actually going to use the len function. So we're going to use the len function with the word variable. And remember, the len function is going to return the number of characters in the word variable. So len of word, and it's going to return a number to us. And then let's just say we want to print out the word as long as I is less than or equal to that length. So if you click run, you see we have an infinite loop because I does not change and I will always be 0. So in this case, you would have to add a value to I. And for this example, we'll just add 5. And then we'll run it. And then you see it printed out program twice. Because if you look or hover over this, then the length of the word is actually going to be 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So it's going to run 2 times. First, it's going to say while I is less than or equal to the length of word. So when it first starts, I is 0, so it's going to print out program. Then it adds 5. So when it adds 5, then it will say while 5 is less than or equal to the length of word, which is 7, we want to print out word, which is program. But as soon as it hits this line on the second iteration of that loop, it then adds 5 again to I, making it 10. So the next time the loop runs, I is going to be 10. So while 10 is less than or equal to 7, then print word. And being that 10 is not less than or equal to 7, that's why word does not print out. And that's why we only get program printed out twice. So that shows you how to use a string with your while loop. Now, if you wanted to, remember that to avoid those infinite loops, you just have to make your loop in some way. And we can do that using the break statement. So in this case, we'll use some numbers and we can say num is going to equal to 20. And then we'll say while I is less than or equal to 20, we want to print I. But if, actually, let's just run this first. And you see we get an infinite loop, so we'll stop that. So before we print out anything, here we're going to put a statement for if a number is a certain number. So if, in this case, let's change this to num. If num is equal to 10, we want to print the number is 10, and then we're going to do the break. So this would stop our loop from running once it's 10. And here we're just going to add 1 to I, and when you click run, you see it will continue to run. Now, here, we're checking num if 20 is equal to 10, which is not true, so this wouldn't happen. So when you're using stuff like this, you need to make sure your variables line up or it's not going to work how you thought it would. And that's going to give you an error, a logic error. So you need to ensure that when you're using variables that you're matching the variable names up. So in this case, you see that it's still printed 10 because the variables aren't lined up. So I need to change it to the correct variable that I'm using in this case, the variable that's going to be changing, and I'll change that to be I. And then you see that nothing happens. So let's walk it together. So while I is less than or equal to num, so here, if you look, I is not established. So it's kind of assuming where you want to start. So in these cases, I would always say to establish your variables if you're going to use them. So that's just a good rule of thumb. So here we'll say I is equal to 5. So if you click run, then you see it works because your program was getting confused. You didn't state what I was, and that's what it didn't know what to print to you. So if you're using variables in your condition, make sure you establish them ahead of time when you're using them so you don't confuse your computer. However, in this case, you see that the break statement did occur. So our loop did not run until it reached 20. It actually stopped at 10, where we told it to. So we said if I is equal to 10, print the number as 10, and then break. So as soon as that break comes, your loop will stop running forever. It's like breaking the loop and it will no longer run. So you can use a break statement anytime you want to get out of your loop. And this is a simple example of that. Now I'm going to show you an example of the continue statement. And I'll copy the same code here just to save some time. And I'll come down here and paste it. And here we're going to test out the continue statement. So here we're just going to change this to continue. All right, now we have continue, and basically continue statement is just going to stop the loop from running the remainder of the loop. So it's just pretty much going to ignore any lines after continue and then update the condition and restart the loop as long as the condition is true. So if we were to click play, then you see it's going to print the number is 10 over and over and over and over again. Because once it hits the number is 10, it's just going to hit an infinite loop. And as I said, an infinite loop could cause your computer to crash or come up with errors. So you want to make sure you don't do that. But if we scroll up, you see all of these errors we're getting. So our loop was running for a long time. So in this case, you need to pay attention to what you're doing. So here, I'll take this out and I'll add it here. So let's replace this and then click run. So then you see it said continue and the loop is still running forever. So stop, and then you see that you need to determine exactly why your loop is not running when you get things like this. So in this case, of course, you have to rewalk your steps. So the first thing you would do is look at your variable names. So we have num is equal to 20 and I is equal to 5. So while 5 is less than or equal to 20, you want to check to see if I is equal to 10. So in this case, we're actually going to just move this up because this will update our variable as soon as the loop begins. So clicking run, you see our loop has now stopped because we're updating our value up here and not down here. So your value down there is just going to continue to cause you problems. So you want to make sure you update your variable or your iterator variable as soon as possible. And in this case, it's I. So if you look in our output, it prints out 6, 7, 8, 9, and it skips 10 because we used the continue statement. So when you use the continue statement, it's pretty much saying instead of printing out I, we just want to continue to the next iteration, which is 11. So it skips over 10 and goes right to 11 and continues to print out there. So the continue statement is just going to allow you to ignore something temporarily for a certain point in that loop iteration. So it's up to you which one you want to use, if you use any. The break will break your loop completely, and the continue will just break it temporarily. So That's all I have for this video. And this is a basic tutorial of how to use while loops as well as Boolean values in your while loops, if-else statements in your while loops, as well as the break and condition statements. So hopefully this tutorial was helpful in helping you understand how the while loop works. And I would like for you to try out your own while loops on your own to just kind of get a feel for how they work and what happens when you do certain conditions. So until next time, please make sure you practice and continue to get better on your Python skills. And I'll see you in the next video.